All right, we are live. Michael, how are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Yep,
Yeah.
glad to be having a discussion today. So it's always good.
Good. I am glad to be having a discussion about this because I had a professor talk about That Hideous Strength. Like he did a course on C.S. Lewis, and so they did the Cosmic Trilogy. And when they talked about That Hideous Strength, he described it as a dog's breakfast. It just was everything all thrown in, and he like this guy absolutely loved C.S. Lewis, but was still like, nah, not a fan. But you seem to like it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I yes, I do. I mean, I feel like um, I had read it when I was a kid, like when I was like, oh, there's more than like the Narnia books, and I found out about those, and I read them, and I think, um, you know, I thought that one was weird because compared to like the first two, where it's like he goes to another planet, it's definitely the odd one, and because like Merlin's in it, so that's pretty strange. Like it is a
Yes.
strange thing, but when I really revisited it, um, you know, during the the early days of COVID or whatever, and you know, there was all this stuff going on politically in America, and um, I was, I had not really like I had absorbed like the latent dispensational view of like end times and things like that. So, trying to correlate like this, what you see going on in the world with some sort of biblical, um, uh, you know, story. And that book to me really reflects the chaotic world that we actually live in. And so yeah, I mean, it really helped me make sense about just the way of, like how would angels and demons and things, if they're interacting in events, like it's silly to expect like, characters in red pajamas, like they're, that they, if we have decided that demons don't exist, then they're going to act more subtly according to our expectations of, what we see in the world.
Well, it is. I think there's huge elements of this series of books, um, which are so more intelligent. And one of my favorite C.S. Lewis books is The Great Divorce. Actually, that's probably my favorite C.S. Lewis book. And all anyone ever told me about it before I read it was about, oh, heaven is more real than hell. So when people visit heaven from hell, the grass goes through their feet and it starts raining and it's like machine gun bullets that they have to like hide and all this others. And that was all anyone ever told me about it.
Hmm.
And this is like such a profound book that is talking about what it's like to be human and what it's like to be fully possessed by these small little things that we won't repent of. That's what that book really is about, and about how our characters are being more and more shaped until our character basically just takes over and we no longer are even making choices, and we continuously are pushing people away and doing like it's such a profound book, and all I heard about it was about how the grass goes through the people's feet. And I was just like, and it's the same thing with the only thing I ever heard about these books before I read them was about the plot points. So the basic plot of we're talking about what is sometimes referred to as the space trilogy, which C.S. Lewis would hate. Do you know that? Do you know
Yeah.
why?
Well, I mean, I know he didn't like. Obviously, his view of like space as the heavens was very different from the
That's right.
modern sci-fi, description, or just even
Yeah, yeah.
sci-
So the idea that it's empty like that you use the word space means empty, and he'll refer to it as deep heaven when people travel to other planets, because the idea is you get out of Earth and then you're like extra exposed to what heaven is like, and it sometimes like affects characters and all this stuff. So it's sometimes also called the Ransom trilogy or the Cosmic trilogy. So episode 1, which is Out of the Silent Planet, is about obviously J.R.R. Tolkien, right? It's a language professor.
I didn't know that until like way later. I didn't, but because I like the first time I read it, I was probably a teenager or something. So, but now that I know more of all the stuff, I'm like, oh, it makes more sense. So,
yes, but so plot points: a random linguistics professor with the last name Ransom is kidnapped and brought to Mars, and has adventures on Mars. And it turns out that other planets are not fallen, that Earth is the only. And where it becomes super interesting is he sees not just aliens, he also sees angels. There are angels in space, and there are head angels to specific planets. So the end of the book is characters speaking with the god, for lack of better term, small g, the god of Mars, who's in direct contact with God.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's part 1. Part 2, Ransom is now brought to Venus to prevent the fall from happening on Venus, which in his book is called Paralandra. And so he must battle the devil to stop another fall. And okay, this is all interesting. We're following. It's all going well. But then the third book, which is absolutely bananas, takes place on Earth, has scenes of boring university politics. But then this guy related to the university politics named Mark Studdock gets brought forward to become part of a secret society, which is trying to contact macrobes, as in the opposite of microbes, which, as it turns out, are governing spirits / demons that then take over the head of a convict. His wife is having visions, and then it ends in the Tower of Babel and the flood. Also, there's a bear named Mr. Bultitude, and also Merlin is in it.
Yeah.
And someone becomes the heir of King Arthur as well. All this happens in the same book.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, in retrospect, like, Arthur was in. They mention him in the second one, or do they mention him in the second one, or do they just refer to the fact that, Paralandra is like where he has gone to rest? I don't remember. I don't remember
Right.
which book it's in,
Yeah.
but that's so. It's like there's a little hints there.
Yeah.
It's I think it's one of those things where it's interesting because it's probably even just in the way, like, when people even take the Bible and want to like pick out all these little details and say these are incoherent. There's obviously all these layers of context that make those seemingly incoherent details make a lot more sense. But if you remove all those, that's because that's because I think I remember there was like a review from George Orwell talking about basically saying that it was bananas. Because
it is bananas. The thing that is actually strange to me is that I think it all comes together though in that story. And I think this is like a story that C.S. Lewis wanted, like, was getting at all along. Like, to me, it's so coherent and all together. It's just that some of the ideas are very new ideas that people don't realize. And so some things seem bananas that to me, I'm like, oh, okay, this connects with this connects with that. And that's some of the stuff I wanted to talk to you about, because you also have interest in some things that I think other people would see as the bananas elements that I think is, that I like without the kind of background that I think you have a little bit of. It is going to seem like stuff is coming out of nowhere, where it's just like, wait. If like some of the universal history stuff, right? He's doing universal history in this with Merlin, with King Arthur. And so it seems to people like King Arthur has no place in a sci-fi trilogy, but this is not a sci-fi trilogy. That's the problem. You're not realizing what his actual point and his actual starting, like what his perspective is. So you're not seeing how these things possibly tie in together.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the sci-fi elements of like, really, it's mostly just the first
book, and it's just
book.
How they get there, and who even cares.
And I feel like that's the only weak point, because the problem with science fiction is, unless if you decide to set it like ridiculously far in the future, you get to a point where you're like, we either don't have the technology that we expected we would have, or we were wrong about the. So it's like, because that's the thing. It's like his details about like what space was like are wrong.
Well, and an example of that is that there is life. The side of the moon that we see is the dead side. The dark side of the moon actually has a forest on it. And he wrote this before the moon landing. Like, so that's basically one of the details that he gets wrong. Or does he, Michael? Was the moon landing faked, and that actually on the moon there is a forest on the dark side?
I don't know. I'm not real. I've come to a worldview where like I'm at peace with all the conspiracies. Like, they could be true. If they're true, or if they're not true, it doesn't affect, my way of looking at life now. Because God's basically in control of all of it. So
so I think a little bit of knowledge of conspiracy theories is important to understand what the heck he's getting at. And that's what I kind of want to talk about with you. And I haven't seen anyone else talk about, which is some people don't know this. I'm sure you know something about it, is that C.S. Lewis got into the occult. He was a bit into it. He describes in his conversion, in his autobiography that's all about his conversion, Surprised by Joy, that his first entrance into spirituality is weird, mystical, magical, esoteric stuff, right? And that's part of his entry into it. Another part of his entry into it is through this guy, George MacDonald. This is Phantastes, and this is Phantastes with an introduction by C.S. Lewis, right? He does the introduction on this book. And in George MacDonald's other book, Lilith, he popularized the Jewish midrashic and folklore stories related to Lilith. They come back through George MacDonald, and Lewis becomes a Christian through, or becomes aware of the spiritual world through George MacDonald's writing, which is very, very interested in the esoteric and occult understandings of Christianity. Right out the gate, which might have people go, wait, what? And some of the stuff which is now called the unseen realm, Michael Heiser's theology and all that stuff, we can see all over, not just C.S. Lewis, but also Tolkien. So I'll give an example. Sauron in The Lord of the Rings is actually an angel. I'm sure you know that. He's whatever the thing, can't remember what they're called. Do you remember what they're called? The angels of...
I don't know. I'm like, I I only go like this far in Tolkien lore, just
Yeah,
because
yeah.
like everybody else is like, you gotta be like, "Ugh," and I was like, but like, I don't know. I'm more interested in the things that people that have taken his ideas and
Right,
done
right.
new things with them. But yeah,
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. And
Yeah,
the
yeah. So like
Silmarillion stuff.
Gandalf looks like a human. He is not a human,
Yeah.
right? He was created directly by the god of that universe and is bringing about ultimate good within the world as a messenger of that creator. And that there's a fallen versions of that as well. And so if you take a character like Sauron, he appears like he's a king on this world, but he's a giant. He's actually an angelic being, and after he dies, he possesses and tempts people. Right? Like that is unseen realm, Deuteronomy 32 worldview kind of stuff. And within the cosmic trilogy, you have gods of planets that Lewis is just like, yeah, there's gods of planets. That's fine. And that he seems completely comfortable with those ideas, and he seems very, very aware of Nephilim Enochian literature. Is all that stuff connecting with you?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting because obviously, like I've been doing a lot of study recently about. All right, so this may sound a little odd, but think about it for a second.
I'm excited.
Like, so just in trying to like understand our culture and the way it works today and stuff, like, the closest analogy I could think of is like, we have these like online influencers, and
Right,
they
right.
basically are playing the roles of like the Greek gods in myths, these demigods, these lower gods where there's many of them, and they all have like, they all act, they're all like bigger humans. They're like human but more exaggerated, and then they have their different specialties. It's like, oh, there's a lot of like Aries in the red pill movement, and then there's like uh like Artemis is very much in the like feminism, the feminist side of things, and then like Aphrodite is in the more like the porn, kind of side of things. Um, and but then like, so then going back in the New Testament and studying all this stuff, and it's like, so I kind of started in just learning more about Artemis, because of the whole Acts 19 where Paul goes to Ephesus, and there's this whole like
Great is Artemis among the Ephesians. Great is Artemis among the for 2 hours.
Yeah. and they're trying to like say, and so like, depending on the translations you look at, they'll talk about like Artemis whose image fell from heaven. But then it's like, wait, what was this image? Oh, it was like some kind of a stone that fell from heaven, the sky. It actually says falls from Zeus. And if you're Latinizing it, Zeus, that's Jupiter. And it's like, okay, wait, Jupiter is a planet. Like, and they had that thing where it's like, somehow these gods are actually the physical things moving around the solar system, and these sort of like spiritual personalities, and they have
and that happens in Narnia too. In one, I believe it's one of the later books, you meet someone who's a star, and they go, oh, in our world stars are burning balls of gas. It's just like, no, that's what they're made out of, but that's not what they are. And you just go,
and it's like, and they have this like influence. It's like like more powerful in some locations, but it's like they're not omnipresent, but they are like their influence is spread about, as depending on where people are more or less devoted to them. And then you also have these stories of like embodied creatures doing these deeds and acts and stuff. And it's like all those things are all like mushed together, and it's all like the gods.
Right,
And
right,
so
right, right. And I think
Yeah.
a word like the algorithm then takes on that form as well, where it's very clearly a mind.
Yeah,
It
and then
very
it's
clearly has an
right.
opinion.
And even when it comes to, like, you know, the silversmiths are saying, he says that gods made with hands aren't real gods. And it's like, what, why, like, how and we're like, how could they not know, like, if you're making a statue that it's not a god? But then it's like, oh, okay, well, like, what if somebody makes like this thing or something, you know?
Right,
And it's
right.
like, I don't know, it seems like people treat these things like, if they're not gods, like they are kind of powerful entities or something. You know, we do kind of get enamored with our own creations. And so, yeah. So it's, the world's always like this crazy mishmash of stuff. And we
Well,
want easier ways to pick it apart. But
yeah. Now, I want to make a couple of references to other bits of Lewis's work. So this is from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when the children are speaking with Mr. and Mrs. Beaver. We have this little interaction. I mean, isn't the witch herself human? She'd like us to believe it, said Mr. Beaver, and it's on that she bases her claim to be queen. But she's no daughter of Eve. She comes of your father Adam's. Here, Mr. Beaver bowed. Your father Adam's first wife. Her they called Lilith, and she was one of the jinn. That's what she comes from on one side, and on the other, she comes of the giants. No, there isn't a drop of real human blood in the witch. That's why she's all bad, though, Mr. Beaver, said Miss Beaver. True enough, Miss Beaver, replied he. There may be two views about humans, meaning no offense to the present company, but there's no two views about things that look like humans and aren't. So in the Chronicles of Narnia, the witch is a Nephilim and is a descendant of Lilith.
yeah.
Like, straight up, it's not implied, it is straight up in the text that Lewis is completely comfortable with a lot of this literature that people aren't even realizing is an idea that was kicking around.
Yeah. I mean, I do think, well, you know, I don't know. I guess because, you know, it's like, there's like Tolkien's complaints about Lewis and stuff.
Right,
like,
right.
Because Tolkien was very much like, I'm constructing a world, I'm controlling all the parameters, the languages, the mythology. And so there's like canon of Tolkien that's like very official.
Right.
And I feel like Lewis, you know, he puts all this mishmash of stuff. And because even he basically puts Tolkien's world into his world,
into our world.
Yeah.
That we
which
could
is
actually
in our
access
world.
it. Because to Tolkien, there is no Middle Earth.
Yeah.
It's the legends of a non-existent people, essentially. Right. It's the legends and myths. Whereas C.S. Lewis is, no, this is in our world. Imagine you could, yeah.
But I would say, and I think this is a
Uh-oh. Michael, are you still there? I am hoping I did not lose Michael. Michael, can you hear me? For I can't hear you. Your glorious beard is frozen. Okay, I'm going to try to do something. Is this really working? Let me check, see what I can do. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Hezi and Cassandra and Sherry for joining us in on this conversation. I'm hoping Michael will join me again in a moment. Maybe he got a work call. Thank you, Cassandra. Yes, that was a perfect still frame. Beautiful. The man, whatever you think of Michael, everyone, you have to admit he has a glorious, glorious beard. So I think I'll go into the crazy directions then that I was hoping to go in with Michael, even though he is no longer able to join me. Perhaps he'll come back. I'll just keep an eye on it. So an aspect of that particular book, That Hideous Strength, that Lewis starts getting into, which I find very, very, very interesting, is the idea that universities have these little in-groups and secret societies. And you don't have to be a crazy conspiracy theorist to find some of this stuff particularly interesting. So an example of one that I just find a little bit interesting, and if you know people, you can just say, hey, is this true? If you know anyone who became an engineer, I had a friend who became an engineer, and part of my buddy becoming an engineer is they bring him into a room, and there was an anvil and a chain, and he had to say an oath, right? This is just a Wikipedia page on the engineers ring. So if you know engineers, they all have a ring that they may have gotten in a special ceremony upon graduating. Maybe they actually said this oath. And so my one buddy was telling me about what it was like to become an engineer and how he got that ring. And then I meet another engineer and I ask him about it. And he just kind of almost does a look about like, okay, I guess I can talk to you about it. And he just has a little conversation with me about this. Really, like, it's not incredibly dangerous, but this little secret pact that all engineers kind of have. It's just this little secret society, secret ring kind of a thing. It's not that secret. It's not that big of a deal. But you could understand how things would begin to stack. So an example of if you were part of one of these organizations that universities often had, I mean, they sometimes had secrets that were only kept within those organizations. So let's just say you were going to form, like at my work, for example, at some point, my boss says to me, he hired someone and there were some issues. So he says to me one time, I would like to hire some guys that I know are reliable. How about you, Dave? Do you know reliable guys? Could you bring forward someone who's reliable? Could you hire someone? This wasn't like a secret society thing, but I hired a guy from my church. I hired people that I knew, that I was in communities with, that I could say, this is a trustworthy guy, right? But where that becomes a little bit scary is where you have places like Yale that have organizations like Skull and Bones, and the CIA is looking to form, and we want people that we can trust. Okay, we have this little fraternity, trust everyone in this fraternity. So then that comes forward. But then there's some real questions about what that looks like on a larger level. Oh, it says that Michael is trying to get back in. Give me 1 second, guys. Please bear with me. Okay, Michael is trying to get back to us, so hopefully he'll be able to join us. So related to groups like Skull and Bones, and they have some weird traditions, we kind of go, well, that's a little bit suspicious, and it especially as it relates more and more to people in higher and higher realms of power. So I'm going to share something with everyone that I'm not trying to say one thing or another about all this stuff. But C.S. Lewis, being high level at a university, had some interactions with these things, so that people think it's so random that there's like a secret society kind of element related to that. But C.S. Lewis would have had direct experience with these things. And I'll give an example of one that might freak people out a little bit.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go
I'm
wild.
sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the record.
Number 322.
First of all, he's not the nominee, and look, I look
Are you
forward.
prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us? Not much, because it's a secret. Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code? I wish there were something secret I could manifest. 322, a secret number? There are all kinds of secrets, Tim, but one thing is not a secret. I disagree with this president's direction that he's taking the country. We can do a better job, and I intend to do it. And we'll be watching. Be safe on the campaign trail. John Kerry,
Okay,
join
so
us.
there
We'll be right back.
is a perfect example of that is a perfect example of a secret society that does exist. And like, I didn't make that up. I'm not going to go into directions to say what any of this stuff means, but to say that there isn't secret societies or this kind of interest, that's just not true. Like, we can manifestly see that. The problem with all this stuff is that then you're trying to make conclusions. You're trying to make conclusions about stuff. Oh, Michael, come on, buddy. I'm going to share this. I'm going to see if I can share this in the chat. Maybe someone else wants to join in if Michael is not able to. Yeah, should let you in, Michael. Sorry about that. These are real organizations. They have real effects on the world. To what extent? It basically, it's one of those things that it's in a room and you don't know what's happening. And that to me is in and of itself similar to actually how the spiritual world works. I had an encounter with organized crime. I'm not going to get into it at all. But you watch something like Goodfellas, and in Goodfellas, there is, there's a restaurant that mobsters go to. And, everyone here, they're just regular people. Maybe you go to this restaurant. You go to this restaurant over and over again. You have a good time at this restaurant. And you have no affiliation with the mob, but little do you know that by going there, money directly from you, power from you, is directly going to members of organized crime. That's just a part of the world. And I realized that has happened to me. I mean, anyone who has bought drugs also knows this experience. I was in high school. I bought drugs in high school, and the guy that I bought drugs from, I smoked a little bit of weed, and that would have come from a drug dealer. And that drug dealer also had other products that I did not buy. But where did he get those products from? Right? How many steps, how many, Kevin Bacon, how many elements of separation was there between me and, major drug dealers in South America? Because my bet is it's less than 6 degrees of separation between me and major elements of organized crime. And so there's these secret societies. I think they operate similar to the spiritual realm, where we have no clue that we are all the time just stepping into these realms. And Vanderklay was talking about it recently. Stories about angels, where they just appear as humans, And I have friends and they have experiences like this where they have interactions with things that they go, wait, I think for 1 second, like going to a restaurant, you for 1 second realize, oh, I am now stepping in a realm of organized crime. In the same way, you might just step into a realm and there it is. There's these elements related to demons, and that's part of what the book is, what this book is about. Michael, I really need you back. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to do an on hold for a second, guys, because I'd like to talk to Michael more about this stuff. So I'm going to see if I can give him a call to solve these problems. So we'll be back. Okay, guys, I was just on the phone with Michael. I'm going to try to get him back in, but in order to do that, I have to close the stream. So it's going to close. It's going to open right back up again, hopefully. Yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys all back here in a second.